Hey everybody, welcome to the Movement Podcast. This is our very first episode where I am interviewing one of my very good friends, Pastor Jeremy White. He and I are discussing parenting, discipline. It's going to be a lot of fun. Also, in further episodes, we're going to be talking about all sorts of things. So hit the subscribe button, get a like in there, even maybe a comment to keep the conversation going. But I'm really excited for you to see our very first episode. Take a look. For those of you that don't know who Jeremy is, kind of introduce yourself, what you do here at Christ Church, what you've done in the past, your family, all that fun stuff.
Yeah, so I'm the NextGen pastor here at Christ Church. I've been on staff here for 4.5 years. I've got a wife and 2 kids. They are 5 and 3 years old. And I get to oversee all the NextGen ministry. So basically birth all the way through high school, all those different areas of ministry. I love what I get to do and all the teams that we get to work with.
Awesome. And then before that, you were in ministry as well as you worked in the film industry. Is that correct?
Yeah, making movies, documentaries, directing, writing, the whole bit, editing. Like I lived in that film world fully.
Which is why he had these extra cameras just lying around. So that's cool. Today, our topic that you should have seen, and I don't know what we're going to title this yet. I've actually had a couple different kind of clickbait thoughts. Like one of them was, I think Jesus would have spanked your kids. And then some other ones that
you don't spank your kid, I will.
Yeah, there you go. Bring him to church. Bring him to Christ Church. We'll spank him for you. No, but the idea is, and for those of you who don't know, I do have 2 kids, same age as Jeremy. I've got 3 and a 5-year-old girls, and parenting is tough. It's a difficult thing and task to understand. You're a great parent as far as I can see from the outside, and we'll talk about the other stuff here in a minute. But I think we want to get into today not just the training up a child, but really the disciplinarian of a parent.
Yeah. How
that functions. It's such a hot topic today. To spank, not to spank, to yell, not to yell, to raise your voice, to give timeouts, all that stuff. So I want to dive into that today with you. Obviously, as a NextGen, you not only get to parent your kids, but you get to see how other parents parent their kids. And sometimes you feel like you are the parents to other parents' kids, I'm guessing.
Yeah. When I've been working with students for 12, 15 years, something like that.
Yeah.
And I appreciate all the parents who let me experiment on their kids first, because I've realized what doesn't work with kids.
Sure.
And it's been cool because I've been able to work with a wide variety of parents of all different perspectives on parenting and how they want to do discipline and all of that. And now that I have my own kids, it's different when you're actually putting those things into practice. And when, the heat of the moment, when the kid's not listening and you're like, how do I discipline my kid? Yeah. I think the most important thing to think about is what's the goal of discipline? The goal of discipline is you want your kid to change. We want our kids to serve the Lord. We want them to love God with all of their heart. We want them to be obedient. We want them to be good impact in the society that God's placed them. And discipline helps with all of that.
Right. And so I'm going to go ahead and specify that I do not have all the answers, but I'm assuming that you do. So we're just going to be leaning heavy on you.
I don't have the answers. I'm learning as we go. My wife has the ansers.
Yeah, and the truth is they could look at us and be like,
why are you two talking about this?
Are 5 years old. Good luck. You just got out of the easy phase. But the truth is you've been in children's ministry for a long time. I was in youth ministry for about 10 years. And so we both kind of have these views that we've got to adjust over time of watching kids grow up. And I know even as I was a youth pastor before I actually had my own kids, I was watching how the good kids in the youth ministry, what I would label the respectful, obedient kids, how their parents actually did train them. And then as I've grown, I've got to figure out some lessons on my own. So we just want to dive all into that. You did a excellent job. Probably, was it 6 months ago, or maybe starting off last year, parenting class, and you kind of hit this head on, which kind of gave me the thought for this podcast of how to discipline your kids, when to discipline your kids, what you should and shouldn't do. And I guess we should preface by everything's an opinion, right? I don't think the Bible has exactly a scripture that says
Step one,
have
spank,
this,
do this.
Spank at this point, and then at that point,
here's when you yell.
Closed fist spank.
The metal glove.
Exactly. I know Proverbs 13:24 says, spare the rod, spoil the child, but that's not really...
No, and I think a lot of people, it's easy to take scriptures out of context. And I think the most important thing to think about is that you are doing something to correct your children. Literally, Proverbs says, if you don't correct children, anyone who rejects correction, it literally says, is stupid.
That's aggressive. Yeah, stupid.
If you reject correction, you're stupid. Okay. And so kids do need that correction. You know, a kid, they're going to run to the road, and you do have to discipline your kid. Why? Because there's danger over here. We don't want you to get hurt.
And I'm telling you, that's probably where I get the most upset with my girls, isn't hey, they missed cleaning up a toy I told them to clean up, or they didn't put their dish in the sink or something like that. It's literally when I have fear that they're going to do something that is going to injure or harm them, and they're not going to act in an obedient mindset immediately. And if there's not that immediate response, they could get hurt. And so as a parent, that's my altogether biggest fear, is that I got to instill this idea in them that they have to obey, and they have to obey immediately, because at some point it could get to the position where if they don't, who knows what could happen, not just, oh, I've got to go pick up your toy for you. So where do you want to start? Where do you want to jump in?
Yeah. So let's first of all talk about the importance, the different ways that people do correct,
okay,
and the ways that people do discipline. And then we can dive into some of those. So
let's talk about your parents. How did they discipline you? And just so everybody's aware of the full concept, because he might not tell you this, Jeremy was homeschooled, which is incredible.
I was the good kid, though.
The one. There's always one.
Yes.
No, he was homeschooled. His parents obviously played a huge part in his upbringing, but I don't think I've ever talked about this. How did your parents discipline you?
So before I say how they disciplined me.
And don't start by saying, well, they never had to because I was a good kid, because I feel like that's where it was about to go.
Well, it was pretty close. Here's the nice thing. I have three older brothers, and growing up, they had a lot of discipline.
Okay.
So I was able to watch what happened to my brothers, and I quickly realized, oh gosh, if I disobey, I get grounded, I get spanked, I get put in my room, whatever, toys removed, miss lunch, miss dinner. So I saw from my parents what happened. So it really was, for me, it was easier. Some kids just naturally are easier. And I'll say this too. You parent each kid differently. You know, the way I parent my kid, Kinsey, my 5-year-old, is different than the way I parent Creighton.
Because they are different kids.
They're different kids. Completely. And the way you discipline them is different. What's the goal of discipline? The goal of discipline is to correct or to change an action.
Change your behavior.
And if I can do that with Kinsey, I can often do it by just speaking to her. Mm-hmm. And she knows, okay, Creighton, we gotta be a little bit more aggressive in what we're gonna do, be a bit more intentional, or not just intentional, but we've gotta try different methods, because me sitting down talking to Creighton isn't going to work. He's not going to naturally set that toy down. So you can discipline your kids differently if they respond differently.
So I love, as you talk about Creighton, I love Creighton. Creighton is such a beast. He's all boy.
All boy.
He's a big old dude.
The biggest 3-year-old you've ever seen. Biggest baby 3-year-old too.
Exactly. But what you actually talked about figuring out how you can, which I guess is part of a parent's first job, is figuring out how your kid best responds to what type of discipline. Mm-hmm. Because I remember you told me one time, Creighton, as big as he is super sensitive, and like can immediately turn from going Hulk on a room to just like weeping. And so you have to figure that where Kinsey can take probably a tongue lashing a little bit easier, and just be like you talk to me, like what's the big deal? So you have to change that style.
You adjust to the kid.
Sure.
And so my parents disciplined me different than they did my older brothers. So for me, it often was sitting down. Yes, I got some spankings growing up.
How many?
Man, maybe 5. You're talking about 5 at one time, right? Like
total?
5.
Good Lord.
I mean,
I hope my parents are listening to this.
It was a very rare thing, but again, I wanted to obey, and all my parents would have to do, my mom would just have to look at me with this disappointed look, and I changed. Yeah. So again, they didn't need to spank me because I truly was repentant. If the goal of discipline is to get your kid to repent and to change their behavior, if you can do that with a look, if you can do that with a conversation, if you can do that by other methods, then you don't have to go to spanking.
So, and what I'm hearing you say is really like this idea that it's not just like the level of punishment fits a crime. It's literally when you can see that the repentant heart is there, when you can see that they understand, oh, I messed up and I need to change. Like that's when, like, for example, she could do one thing. One day she gets a spanking because she doesn't understand it. The next day it's that look. And that look, she just goes, oh, she remembers what she's already got. Oh man, I can't do that again. So like even with the same child, the discipline can adapt depending on.
And now you don't want to be inconsistent with discipline. That's important. Good. So yes, it can adapt depending on the situation. You don't want to be inconsistent of where, well, you got a spanking for not putting your dishes away after breakfast one day and the next day we didn't do anything. The key is you got to be consistent in whatever discipline.
Because you're looking for that change.
Exactly.
And I guess, which I'm sure your brothers, if we were to interview them, felt like you got it easy. But the truth is you learned from their mistake.
I did.
Which is so frustrating as a parent when you have multiple children. And the youngest, like that's what Waverly, my youngest, she'll see Willow get in trouble. And I'd be like, all right, she just saw what happened. And then like the next day she does the same thing. And I'm like, were you not just like, you know, what's about to happen? Exactly. And so that's, I think for me, what's even more frustrating, and I have to temper my frustration because I realize that's the first time she's experiencing that consequence. Like, yeah, you would hope that your 3-year-old would see cause and effect, but they're 3 years old, they're 5 years old or whatever. And so you kind of have to, I like that consistency. Like, okay, I spanked child A because they did something. The next day, I'm still mad about it, but child B did it. So now I just go nuts. Well, no, you've got to remember, it is the first time that they're actually experiencing it. Even if you hope that they would have seen, unless you set the whole family down and you're going, hey,
here's the reason
Willow just got spanking for this reason, which maybe that's even more powerful. I don't know.
There's something else I heard one time from parenting. They said the punishment should be bigger than the crime. Wow. And, you know, often we think, oh, no, the punishment and the crime, they should be equal. No. You want the punishment to be bigger than the crime so that the kid doesn't do that. And especially, I believe that takes place as you move into high school, middle school age. You know, if my kid is going to steal the car, I want a punishment that is going to make sure he never does this again. I don't want him to think, well, if I steal the car, all that's going to happen is this.
Right.
No. It's going to be way
So you don't want them to measure it out. Like I remember Carver, my brother's son, he had a problem getting out of bed at night. And we were all over there. And of course, when we're over there, he really wants to stay up and watch TV or watch a football game or something like that. And he was younger, probably 3 or 4 years old. And Brock told me that one time he was out there watching TV or something, and Carver just comes out and he goes, Dad, can I go ahead and get my spanking? Because I want to watch TV. So he's like, let's just get this over with.
I know it's worth it for me to get that spanking so I get what I want.
Right, because you never want your kid to measure out like, am I willing to just go ahead and take this punishment because I really want to do what's bad? But that's when you're talking about you want to get that change of behavior, change of heart issue. Back to the consistency I thought I had with the consistency, because I feel like definitely me, and I feel like most parents are going to adjust their disciplinary effectiveness or degree based on whether or not we're at home or whether we're out in public. And it could vary both ways. If we're in public, I don't want to embarrass myself as much to discipline you the way I would when we were at home. Or I'm so embarrassed that you did this in public, now I want to let everybody know, and we just go, everybody's seeing the lady in Walmart wearing their kid out for reaching for the Skittle bag. I'm like, they're gonna reach for like, I don't care what conversation you had in the car about don't you touch anything, it's gonna happen. At the same time, the parent that will let the kid literally lay down on the floor kicking and screaming in the middle of the toy aisle. So like, where's the healthy?
Yeah, I think there's times that discipline needs to be public and there's times that discipline needs to be private.
Okay. How do you justify?
The time that it needs to be public is if you have other kids or if there's other people that, their friends or whatever that are there, that you basically are making a statement to everybody present. If let's cut away from kids for a second. Let's say as an employee, if I've got an employee that's consistently showing up late to a meeting and everybody's showing up to that meeting on time except for this one employee, I'm going to make a public declaration that this employee is late and needs to correct that. Why? Because all the other ones are watching it.
Yeah.
All the rest of the employees are trying to see what's going to happen. Is anything going to happen? Same thing's true with your kids. There are times if I've got 3 or 4 kids, I've got 2 kids. So if Kinsey does something wrong in front of Creighton, I'm going to correct her in front of Creighton so that Creighton also is kind of getting the benefit of seeing the punishment. He's not going to get punished, but he's going to get the benefit of learning from her punishment. There are times, though, when it's a personal situation that I do pull the kids in one-on-one. Hey, Kinsey, I'm so disappointed that you did this. I can't believe that you would have lied to your mother. He didn't have to see that necessarily if he wasn't there when it all took place.
Sure.
This is a private one-on-one. You don't want to embarrass your kids.
Sure.
So when you can do it private, it's great, but then there are times that you need to make that public declaration.
Yeah, I wonder also if the effectiveness of people's assumption of what's about to take place. For example, you've got a kid at a party or something like that, and your kid does something that is just across the line for you, time to discipline. Just letting everyone see you grabbing your child by the hand and walking into that private room, whether it be a restroom or something like that. Everybody knows what's going on.
Everybody knows what's happening.
Y'all are going in there to share a donut together. Everybody knows. And so that's where I don't know. Like, I wonder if there's people out there going, hey, should I, if spanking is what we believe in or whatever, I think you hit it on the head. You don't want to embarrass your kid unless it's in the moment, has to happen. The discipline has to take place right there because you need to set a staple. But at the same time, can that same moment be justified 30 seconds later outside of the room of everybody's eyesight when everybody knows when she walks back in and her eyes are red and tearing up, or you walk back in together, everybody knows what happened in that room, but they didn't have to see it for themselves.
And some of it depends on the age of the child too.
Okay.
A 1-year-old isn't going to remember something that happened 5 minutes ago.
Sure.
So it does need to be a no, as you hit their hand, oh, we can't do that.
Yeah.
We don't take toys. It depends on the age. Most kids, you do have the time to be able to walk back. And I think in those situations, it definitely is better to do it privately.
But it's gotta take place, especially for a young kid. It's gotta take place at the time of the incident. You
need to let the student know. You need to let them know immediately that this is going to be taken care of.
Sure.
Hey, I saw this. I heard about this. We're going to be dealing with this. And whether you deal with it right then as you walk to a room, whether you deal with it 45 minutes from now when you're in the car, or an hour from now when dad's home, whatever.
I feel like everybody's had that moment, everybody that grew up in the church style that I grew up in. When we had the choir, my mom would be sitting up in the choir loft, and Brock and I, or not Brock, probably just me, were jacking around. And you get that look from the choir loft that just says, just so you know, the car ride is not going to be enjoyable for you. It's that one. It's the first like this, and then you ignore it, and then she just kind of gives you the, okay, we both know what's going to happen in the car ride, and we had the minivan, so she could literally, as soon as we get out of the parking lot, unbuckle her belt and slide in the backseat with us, and then it's just, I'm so sorry. I will start apologizing to her. I'm sorry. And then she said, no, we're good. No, we'll take care of it. And I knew, all right, it just got real. But
Lindsay's
it wasn't
mom
happening at the time.
Yeah.
She didn't... Thinking back, I'm pretty sure I can safely say this. She never actually walked down from the choir loft at the time. It's like, oh, you misbehaved. I got to take care of it now, because that.
But she was able to make contact with you. There was communication. We
knew
was
what was
delivered.
going on. Yeah.
You knew. Okay, she knows. She caught this.
Absolutely.
This is going to be dealt with.
Yeah.
Yeah, my wife, Lindsay, she would tell me that she'd be sitting in church and her mom would be sitting right beside her. And if Lindsay's goofing off trying to talk to a friend, her mom would literally just give her a little pinch on the arm. And that was the sign. Okay.
Yes.
This is coming.
Now, one time my dad in the middle of the service, I think this was just because of multiple moments of me not learning my lesson. I think it was a Sunday night church, which was a little bit more flexible. And he was going off on a message because he was down off the stage on the floor, which I had not noticed, which put him in even closer contact to me. And I'm sitting over on the left side playing tic-tac-toe with my buddy. He made some move I wasn't prepared for. I'm like, just that. And all of a sudden I hear, Brendon. And I'm like, that better be God. Because and I look up and my dad is in front of the row I'm on and just going, and he just says, why don't you go sit with your mother? And can I tell you, we didn't have to have another conversation. There was no spankings. There was no groundings, because he knew me standing up, and he did
in
not.
front of the church.
He didn't speak until I had sat back down, and then just went on with his message like nothing had happened. And you want to talk about a kid that learned there's so many different ways.
And in that situation, he didn't have to spank. Why? Because your attitude, everything was going to change.
I don't think I've ever
that.
played tic-tac-toe since that moment. My daughter wanted to play at the restaurant. I'm like, I can't. Where's Poppy? Looking around.
Thanks for joining us today here at the Movement Podcast. Once again, if you enjoyed the conversation, keep it going by dropping a comment or hitting the thumbs up button. If you have any ideas for future episodes, feel free to let us know. In order to know when our next episode comes out, please hit the subscribe button and tap the little bell so you can get notified when we put out future episodes. Thanks again for being part of the movement.